The forgotten well stood hidden beneath layers of dirt and overgrown vegetation, a relic of a time long past. For years it had remained untouched, its secrets buried deep below the earth. That was until 4 researchers, driven by curiosity and the promise of discovery, unearthed it during an excavation. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. As they dug through the rubble, their tools struck something solid, a massive stone box. The box was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface was adorned with intricate carvings and cryptic symbols, their meaning lost to time. The researchers exchanged astonished glances. What secrets could this ancient artifact hold? It was heavy, requiring all 4 of them to lift it carefully out of the well and place it on solid ground. Even as they set it down, an eerie silence seemed to descend over the dig site. Dr. Elena, the linguist of the group, ran her fingers over the carvings, her brow furrowed in concentration. "These symbols, they look like a warning," she murmured. But her words were lost amid the excitement. The team couldn't contain their curiosity. Using their tools, they worked to pry the box open. It was sealed tightly, as if whoever had closed it never intended for it to be opened again. The air grew heavy, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Finally, with a loud crack, the lid gave way. Inside, nestled in the center of the box, was a small, intricately carved artifact. Its design was mesmerizing, a combination of geometric patterns and more of those mysterious symbols. But it wasn't just the artifact that captured their attention. The inside walls of the box were also inscribed, the symbols forming what appeared to be a continuous narrative. "What do you think it is?" Mark, the team leader, asked, his voice tinged with awe. Elena hesitated, a strange unease creeping over her. "I don't know, but this box wasn't just storing something. It feels like it was containing something." The others brushed off her concerns, eager to examine the artifact. But as they lifted it out of the box, an icy chill swept through the air. A faint vibration rippled beneath their feet, so subtle it could have been imagined. But Elena knew better. Something was wrong. The unease lingered as the team placed the artifact on a nearby table for closer inspection. Despite their excitement, the air around them seemed heavier, almost oppressive. The faint vibration that Elena had noticed earlier returned, stronger this time, accompanied by a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the artifact itself. "What's that sound?" Jacob asked, glancing nervously at the others. "It's probably just some kind of natural resonance," Mark suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. Elena, however, was growing increasingly alarmed. She leaned closer to the box, studying the carvings on its interior walls. The symbols seemed to tell a story, one of conflict and chaos, followed by a desperate act of containment. Her fingers traced the patterns, her breath catching as she realized what they represented. "This isn't just an artifact," she said, her voice trembling. "These symbols, this box, was meant to imprison something." Mark scoffed. "Imprison? Come on, Elena. You're letting your imagination run wild." But Elena wasn't convinced. Her gaze shifted back to the artifact, which now seemed to pulse faintly with light, as if alive. Before she could voice her concerns, a sudden, unexplainable chill swept through the dig site. The temperature plummeted, their breath visible in the icy air. "This isn't right," Jacob muttered, his eyes darting around the site. Shadows began to flicker and shift, moving unnaturally against the dim light of their lanterns. They all froze as a loud clang echoed from behind them. A metal tool had fallen to the ground, though no one had touched it. "Okay, "What was that?" Mark asked, his bravado faltering. No one answered. The oppressive silence that followed was more unnerving than the sound itself. Elena broke the silence, her voice urgent. "We need to reseal the box, now." The others hesitated, but the growing sense of dread was undeniable. Together, they tried to replace the lid, but no matter how hard they pushed, it wouldn't budge. It was as if the box itself was resisting their efforts. "Why won't it close?" Jacob said, panic creeping into his voice. Before anyone could respond, the artifact began to glow brighter, its light pulsating in rhythm with the strange hum that now filled the air. The shadows around them seemed to stretch and twist, forming shapes that defied explanation. "What did we unleash?" Elena whispered, dread filling her voice. The team stared in horror as the artifact's pulsating glow intensified, casting unnatural shadows that danced across the walls of their makeshift excavation tent. The hum had grown louder, resonating in their chests like the heartbeat of something alive. Jacob stepped back, his face pale. This isn't normal," he stammered, his eyes darting between the artifact and the shadows. Elena's voice broke through the tension. "We've made a mistake, a huge mistake. This artifact wasn't supposed to be disturbed. The symbols, they're warnings, not decorations." Mark, still clinging to logic, tried to calm the group. "Look, we just need to figure out what's going on. Let's focus. We've dealt with unexplained phenomena before." "This isn't some ancient phenomenon," Elena interrupted. "Don't you see? We've unleashed something that was never meant to be free." The air in the tent grew colder still, their breaths now forming clouds in the frigid atmosphere. The flickering shadows began to coalesce, moving with purpose. It was as if the darkness itself had come alive, crawling and stretching toward the artifact. A sudden, sharp gust of wind swept through the tent, extinguishing their lanterns and plunging them into darkness. For a moment, the only light came from the artifact, its glow now steady and unwavering. The researchers froze, their fear turning to outright terror when a low, guttural whisper filled the air. It wasn't in any language they recognized, but its intent was clear: malice. Mark fumbled with a flashlight, his shaking hands betraying his fear. When the beam finally cut through the darkness, it landed on the artifact, now hovering several inches above the table. The carvings on its surface seemed to writhe and shift, as though they were alive. "Did anyone else just see that?" Jacob asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could respond, the artifact dropped back onto the table with a deafening thud, sending a shockwave through the ground. Tools and equipment clattered to the floor, and the hum abruptly stopped. The sudden silence was almost as unsettling as the sound had been. Elena took a shaky step forward, her eyes fixed on the artifact. "We need help," she said firmly. "We can't handle this on our own." Reluctantly, the group agreed. They contacted a team of specialists in ancient languages and mythology, hoping for answers. When the experts arrived the following morning, their reaction was immediate and chilling. One of them, an elderly professor named Dr. Weiss, stared at the artifact in horror. "You should have never opened that box," he said, his voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Mark asked, his tone defensive. Dr. Weiss turned to the group, his expression grave. "This isn't just an artifact. It's a prison for something ancient and malevolent. And by opening it, you've set it free." The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. Elena's worst fears had been confirmed. "What can we do to stop it?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Dr. Weiss shook his head. "I don't know if it can be stopped. What you've unleashed has been trapped for centuries, maybe longer. The box wasn't just a container. It was a seal, designed to hold this entity in place. It's not bound by our understanding of the natural world. The gravity of Dr. Weiss's words left the group in stunned silence. For a moment, no one dared to speak. The air in the tent felt thick with an unseen presence, as though whatever they had unleashed was listening, waiting. "We can't just leave it like this," Elena said, breaking the silence. Her voice, though steady, carried an undercurrent of urgency. "There must be a way to contain it again." Dr. Weiss hesitated, his gaze fixed on the glowing artifact. "There might be a way," he said at last, "but it will require great risk. The symbols on the box, they describe a ritual, one that could potentially restore the seal. But the process is dangerous and irreversible." Elena didn't hesitate. "Then we do it. We have no choice." The group worked quickly, guided by Dr. Weiss's knowledge and the cryptic symbols etched on the box. They gathered the materials needed for the ritual: ancient herbs, rare minerals, and a precise alignment of the artifact with the carvings inside the box. As the preparations neared completion, the shadows around them grew more restless, coiling and writhing like living things. When the moment came, the team stood in a tight circle around the box, their faces pale but resolute. Dr. Weiss began to chant in an ancient language, his voice echoing unnaturally in the cold air. The artifact responded immediately, its glow intensifying until it was nearly blinding. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a deafening roar filled the air, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Elena clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay focused. Whatever was happening, it was their only chance to set things right. The shadows lashed out, reaching for the group, but the light from the artifact pushed them back, burning them away like smoke in the wind. With a final thunderous crack, the artifact emitted a burst of light so intense that the researchers were thrown to the ground. When the light faded, the artifact lay silent and still, its glow extinguished. The oppressive chill was gone, replaced by an almost peaceful stillness. Dr. Weiss approached the box cautiously. The lid, once immovable, now slid back into place with ease. As it clicked shut, the carvings on its surface seemed to shimmer briefly, before fading into lifeless stone. The prison was sealed once more. The group sat in silence, their breaths heavy with exhaustion and relief. Mark finally spoke, his voice subdued. "Is it over?" "For now," Dr. Weiss replied. "But this box must be hidden, buried far away where no one will find it again. This cannot happen a second time." Elena nodded, her gaze lingering on the box. "We've learned our lesson," she said quietly. "Some things are meant to stay buried." As the team prepared to leave the dig site, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Though they had sealed the box, they knew its contents would never truly rest. They had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. As they drove away, the well and its terrible secret faded into the distance, swallowed by the earth once more. But deep down, they knew the box was more than a relic of the past. It was a warning for the future.